All right, we're now live. All right, again, good afternoon. And I want to thank all of the commissioners for joining us, clerk, administrator, attorney, and we're here to do the people's business. I'll call this meeting to order.
Morning.
Chair recognizes Attorney Brown.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Commissioner Board requests a motion to go into executive session for the discussion litigation.
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion from the commissioner from the 8th and a second from the 2nd. Voting.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Franum, Mr. Garrett,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hassan. He's muted, sir. Mr. Hassan. You're muted, sir.
He's muted and he's working on it.
Don't panic.
All right, we'll come back to him, Madam Clerk.
Okay,
ma'am.
he's there. Okay. Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Stias,
Yes, ma'am.
Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Commissioner Franum out.
Thank you. All right, everyone, we're going to transition in closed session. All right. Chair recognizes Attorney Brown.
Mr. Mayor, we request a motion to execute the closed meeting affidavit.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Voting.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Franum, out. Mr. Garrett,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sun,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Miss McKnight,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Franum out.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I believe this concludes this portion of our special call meeting. And we will be at ease until
Mayor.
2 o'clock.
We have one more item. Are you
Okay, there's one more item.
on the agenda? Yes, sir.
All right. Madam Clerk, Attorney Brown.
No, that was what I was going to call to your attention.
Okay, right.
Discuss the current Richmond County Judicial Circuit.
okay. Is that also not on the regular agenda?
Attorney Brown will explain his rationale for it being on both agendas, sir.
Okay,
In that we only had one item on this agenda, and to fill that time between the gap, the commission was given an option to discuss it on this agenda or the succeeding agenda.
I'd rather do it on the succeeding agenda at 2 o'clock. This gives folks an opportunity to transition. We generally don't get this kind of time, so I would urge the members of the commission to let's talk about that 2 o'clock hour.
Mayor, remind them to come back now, like we don't normally have this.
Yeah, I want to say that again. We normally don't have this kind of time, so let's take advantage of it. Yeah.
I need to quit killing the dead.
Hopefully we'll be saying that at the end of the regular commission meeting too.
Absolutely.
I'm
All
going
right,
to stand up.
again,
We can depend on the mayor pro tem to get that done, right?
Well,
absolutely.
I'm going to stand at my door because Ms. Bonner said we're going to get lunch today.
Make
Is that
sure
what
it's the right pigeon now. Don't take
All right. We're going to stand in recess until 2 o'clock.
You took it out. Okay. Let me.
Can you come in for a second, please?
Yep, be right there.
All right.
Come on in.
I can actually.
Funny lady.
Thank you.
Okay. Madam Clerk. Okay, Madam Clerk. All right, we're ready here to proceed. And all right, I think we've got everybody here. Madam Clerk, if you're ready, I'm ready to call this meeting to order. The January 19, 2021 second commission meeting of the year. We do call this meeting to order.
Are you ready?
Yeah, Madam Clerk, I'm ready. I'm just printing out.
Oh, okay.
I'm printing out the addendum.
Okay, okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Madam Clerk, let's do this so we can try to move expeditiously. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read the addendum agenda proposal. So Madam Clerk, if you could just, again, let's read that first so that we can adopt that hopefully without objection. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read it, but if we can adopt that without objection, we can proceed.
Hear no objection, sir.
All right, no objection. All right. All right. Okay. All right, Madam Clerk, Chair recognizes Madam Clerk.
At this time, we will have our invocation and pledge of allegiance. Would you please stand?
Okay.
Eternal God, we thank you for this beautiful day. We ask for your guidance for all who devoted themselves to the common good of this community. We lift up members of the Augusta Commission and staff for special guidance and direction today towards their deliberation. Heal us from our differences and unite us, O Lord, with a common purpose. In the name of the triumph God, amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
allegiance to the flag
Flag
of the
of the
United States of America
of America
and
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
for all.
All right, Madam Clerk. We've got a couple of things in front of us this morning. Out of a desire to try to move along expeditiously, I do know that we have Mr. Miller Edwards from Malden and Jenkins, who's here to present the audit results from 2019 this afternoon. That's item number 23 on the agenda. So I just want to make everyone aware that Miller Edwards is here, and at the appropriate time, we're going to call them up that they might be heard. At this point, Madam Clerk, I'll turn it over to you. We've got recognitions, and let's do that, and then we'll move into the consent agenda.
Thank you. Call your attention to the recognition portion of our agenda. Mr. Kevin Enright, Special Olympics, Georgia, will present the 2020 Training for Life Award to the Augusta Parks and Recreation Department.
Kevin is joining us virtually. He is here. Mr. Enright, welcome, and thank you for joining us today for the Training for Life Award for Augusta Parks and Recreation. Again, we didn't get an opportunity to do this in 2020, but we're excited that you're here with us presenting today. You have 5 minutes again. Mr. Kevin Enright.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. The Training for Life Award was established to recognize recreation departments to help with Special Olympics Georgia. I have just started my 26th year with Special Olympics Augusta Stars. And when I wrote this nomination, I realized that nobody had nominated Augusta Recreation and Parks Department. In the 26 years I've been doing it, I use the Brigham Pool every year. I use Garrett Gym. I use Warren Road Gym. I also know that Richmond County Schools does their area basketball games at Warren Road Skills, and that the Augusta Recreation staff volunteer at the Richmond County area games. So this award was long overdue. The staff at Recreation and Parks treat my athletes with total respect. They help out when they're needed. They just go, I think they go out of their way, but so as I said, this was long overdue. And another thing is the staff often tell other people about our program, and so we get volunteers and athletes out of that. So it's a two-way street for us, and I just appreciate that I get to have the time to recognize everybody with the Recreation and Parks Department that has helped us be a success for the last 25 years plus. And I hope that we get to get back into those facilities and start training again. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Absolutely. We look forward to everyone being able to get back into the facilities. We want to applaud the work that you're doing for Special Olympics, and the Augusta Recreation and Parks Department. Kudos to you for receiving this. I'm going to take an opportunity to hear from our Recreation and Parks Director, who may want to say just a few words regarding this.
724-0791.
Mr. McDowell, again, this is an opportunity to speak with regards to the award.
Right. Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to the commission. We are indeed honored and humbled by this recognition. Kudos to staff and all the hard work that they do to partner with different entities and agencies to highlight the success of Augusta and what we have to offer to all entities that are willing to partner with us. This has been a long-standing relationship. We continue to look forward to many more years to come in working with Special Olympics and making this event a truly prize and treasure of the city of Augusta. So again, all kudos go to staff, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to the commissioners and to the administrator for allowing me to be the director of a great department. We have our challenges, but we're meeting those. And this is just indicative of the men and women that work in that department and the greatness that comes from that department. So again, thank you. And again, thank you to the Georgia Special Olympics for this recognition.
Thank you. Commissioner from the 3rd.
I didn't have anything to say.
Okay. All right, Administrator Donald.
No other comments other than kudos to the director and his team and his group. And I think it's an extraordinary accomplishment for that team, but also to the Augusta Commission.
All right, fantastic. And again, congratulations to our entire Recreation and Park staff. Kevin, thank you for considering our city and our team to make this possible for us. And again, thank you.
Thank you for the time, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, if I could please, on our consent agenda, if I could just acknowledge the planning petitions, and if we could ask Director Sherman to affirm if there are no objectors or no objectors. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, I would start with item number 3. It's a request for a special exception for property known as 4767 Mike Paget Highway. Item number 4 is a request for a change of zoning from a zone A agriculture to a zone heavy industry affecting property known as 1351 Majestic Skies Way. Item number 5 is a request for a change of zoning from a zone A agriculture and a zone B1 neighborhood business to a zone B2 general business affecting property at 827, 831, and 835 Scott Nixon Memorial Drive. Item number 6 is a request for a change of zoning from a zone B2 general business to a zone PUD plan unit development affecting property on Green Street, 12th Street, and 11th Street. Item number 7 is a request for change of zoning from a zone A agriculture to a zone R1 one family residential affecting property known as 2111 Power Road, 1901 and 1945 Power Road. Item number 8 is a request for a special exception affecting property known as 2111 Powell Road. Item number 9 is a request for a special exception affecting property known as 4323 Windsor Spring Road. And we ask Mr. Sherman if there are any objectors in the common space to these planning petitions.
All right, Madam Clerk, hopefully Director Sherman is, okay, there he is. He's downstairs. All right, Director Sherman.
Ms. Bonner and Mayor Commissioners, there are no objectors present. If I could mention one thing before you proceed, I needed to make a couple of comments about Z2104. There's some conditions in there. There are 3 conditions that I need to correct.
He needs it.
Director Sherman.
Yes, sir.
Okay, please proceed. Tell us what those conditions are.
Okay, on Z2104, there are 17 conditions, but on number 3, it says the overall density shall not exceed 40 units per acre, not 38. So the 38 should be changed to 40. Number 6, a minimum of 10% of the site shall be dedicated to open space, not 18%. And number 7, the maximum lot coverage shall be lot coverage shall be 90%, which does not include parking and similar surface improvements, not 80%.
So that's 40 units on 3, and number 6, 10%, and number 7, 90%, Mr. Sherman?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question around this?
Hold on just 1 second. Commissioner from the 6, just hold for a moment. Director Sherman, are there any other changes to the remaining conditions?
No, sir, that's all.
All right, Commissioner from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Director Sherman, in terms of these changes you just suggested, what was the overall reason for making these changes?
This was discussed at the Planning Commission meeting, and it was, during the discussion, it was to correct the numbers that were included in the staff report. So these numbers are the accurate and correct numbers.
Okay. Also, I just noticed here, and I'm going from memory at this point. In terms of parking space, have we made a revision? And I think we've always suggested it in terms of the amount of parking spaces for residences or apartments or what have you. You know, normally, you know, sometimes we go 2.5, sometimes we go 2-car household. I think you want a little less than this on this particular reason. Have we changed our overall strategy about how many parking spaces we need?
No, we have not. Now, this property is in the area downtown that is actually exempt from the parking requirements. However, whenever we have a development like this that we're reviewing, we tell the developer, even though you may be exempt, we want to know where people are going to park. And in this case, they have 140 units and they're providing 190 spaces on site. And the units are ranging from 1 and 2 bedroom and studio apartments.
Okay. You got any? Did y'all discuss in it at all about the price points of these? I know we're not having anything necessarily invested in, but what are the price points?
No, sir, I do not have that. And I believe the applicant may be online and can answer those questions for you. Jeff, do you see anyone from ATC Development, Woody Belangia?
Looking through the list right now.
If you don't have them online, it's okay. I just wondered if you
Don't see anybody.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Continue, Madam Clerk.
Okay. Our consent agenda consists of items 1 through 11 with no objectors to any of our planning petitions. Also with the noted correction by Director Sherman to item number 6.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right. I appreciate that. At this point, I want to take an opportunity to entertain additional items for the consent agenda. Madam Clerk, let me put out on the table just a few while I'm here. Item number 12, item number 16, 17, 21, 22, 24, and 27 for consent.
Mayor, 22 needs to be discussed. I mean, you said 20. Did you say 20?
No, sir. I said 12, 16, 17, 21,
Okay.
22, 4, and 7.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My bad. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Commissioner from the 10th.
I'd like to add number 18, please.
Commissioner from the 1st.
Add number 24.
24?
24.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I included that one.
Did you include 24? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner from the 4th.
Yes, sir. I would like to pull number 2 and number 9.
Number 2 and number 9.
Yes, ma'am.
Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, is there any consideration for number 3 on the addendum agenda?
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Yes, number 3, addendum agenda. Okay,
That's a grant award for the purchase of a K9 pre-trained dog for the Richmond County Sheriff's Office.
yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk, motion and a second, voting.
Mr. Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Frenham, Mr. Garrett,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sun,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Frenham out.
Madam Clerk,
Yes, sir.
let's go with our alcohol licenses.
Okay. Directors, Ms. Walton, please.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
We have one, which is a new location. It's alcohol number 21-1. It's a request by Q Ren for an on-premise consumption beer and wine license to be used in connection with Miriam Asian Fusion located at 630 Crane Creek Drive, Suite 402. There will be Sunday sales at this location. This application has been approved by the Richmond County Sheriff's Office and Planning and Development.
Any objectors, Ms. Walton?
Apologize, there are no objectors to this application.
Good afternoon. My name is Qi Ren. My address is 2075 Reserve Lane, Augusta, Georgia 30907.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Walton?
Ms. Walton.
We have a new application. It's alcohol number 21-2. It's a request by Kelvon Mitchell for a Sunday sales license to be used in connection with Prime Time Bar and Grill located at 1721 Gordon Highway. This application has been approved by the Richmond County Sheriff's Office and Planning and Development. There were no objectors to this application.
Mr.
All right, please step forward, sir.
Kelvon Mitchell. Address is 235 Broadmoor Drive, Castleton, Georgia 30517.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Mayor,
All right, Chair recognizes Commissioner from second.
move for approval.
All right, we're going to take them together, sir. We were just getting them read in for the record. All right, Madam Clerk, we got a motion to approve 13 and 14.
Yes, sir. Need a second.
I'm waiting on-
Second.
Brenda Garrett. Okay, that's Mr. Garrett, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Voting.
Mr. Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Frenham, Mr. Garrett,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hassan. He's muted, sir. Mr. Hassan,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Frenham out. Item 13 and 14 items.
Madam Clerk, thank you for that. I want to go back to the administrator sent out a memo earlier requesting the item 15 be deleted from the agenda. And so there's still some more work that needs to be done with that. I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that, and without objection, item 15 is being deleted from the day's agenda and will be brought back at a later date. Okay.
Okay.
All right, without objection. Okay. All right, Madam Clerk, back to 2.
Item number 2
Yes, ma'am.
is the final plat, Laurel Park, a request for concurrence to approve a petition by HC Surveying, Inc. regarding a residential project located off Tobacco Road and contains 83 lots. Mr. Sayes, pull down.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner from the 4th.
Thank you, sir. Can we get Mr. Sherman back in?
He's there.
Okay, I have a couple of questions for him reference this item. Mr. Sherman, when this item was first up before the commission, there was a lot of discussion on it about the final plat, what it would look like, the fact that we wouldn't have any, that was a proposed additional parking areas that we said probably would be a bad idea to have folks come out sitting in these areas. I want to ask you if you remember that, and did we get those items addressed? Because as I look at the plat, I don't see the parking issue addressed. Can you assist me with that, please, sir?
Well, I can tell you, I don't remember exactly, but I can tell you that 16 guest parking spaces are provided on this phase, and additional guest parking spaces will be provided on the next phase. There'll be roughly 80 to 90 more units. Once they get past 100, then the second access road is required. They're showing an access road now that's for the fire department to use. It's unimproved. But to answer your question, yes, sir, they do have some guest parking spaces included in this phase.
Well, let me, the question is, those guest spaces, we was concerned that those guest spaces would be places because they're not near the buildings. They will be a place for anybody to come and gather. That was the concern about guest parking, the way it was laid out.
Well, the guest parking, of course, it's not in front of the units. It is in a central area where, say, if you have guests, they would park there and then walk to the unit.
That ain't gonna happen, Mr. Sherman. But I foresee a problem with that, and we had talked about this. So if they get this built before I'm off the commission, I'm gonna come back to you when it become a problem. Because I see that as one, because it's really unrestricted or unregulated parking area. And I see, and that we all talked about that, it will probably be a problem, but I won't hold it up on that, but I'm gonna bring it back to you later.
Okay.
Motion to approve with concerns.
Second.
Voting.
Mr. Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
Random, out. Mr. Garrett,
Muted.
Mr. Garrett, you're muted, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I see Mr. Franum, you're in. Do you want to vote on this item, sir, or you?
I'll just wait. I'm not even sure we're voting on it. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Hassan,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sayers,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Franum not voting.
Item number 9, Madam Clerk.
Item number 9 is a request for concurrence with conditions, requesting a special exception to establish single-family residential development on property known as 4323 Windsor Spring Road.
Commissioner from the fourth.
Thank you, sir. Again, I need to speak with Mr. Sherman.
He's here.
All right, thank you. Mr. Sherman, I spoke briefly to you before about this particular development, but I didn't get a chance to see all the details or meet with y'all during the last planning meeting, because y'all did that at the same time we had a meeting, I believe. But the question I have here is, one of your other developments, it was a maximum of three houses per lot. This one here is a maximum of 4 houses per lot. This is right next to Manchester subdivision, which is one of our better top end neighborhoods in South Augusta, and also next to Diamond Lakes. And there's also restricted development area over there due to the wetland part of it. So why do we see that justified, but for them to squeeze 4 houses per lot, so 4 units per lot? And we know that they must go, I ain't trying to be smart, but what kind of square footage are we talking about for these many houses? At 4 houses per lot, per acre, I'm sorry.
Okay, Commissioner, so these are townhomes. They're going to have 9 buildings, and each building will have 4 units in it, except there will be 1 building that has 3 units. The applicant is here. If I could ask him to come up, and then he can explain to you about the wetland area in the middle of the property. The units, though, will be towards the back, and say if to the west and on the north side of the property. If the east is alongside Windsor Spring Road, and the south is on the Park Drive. But the applicant is here, if I could bring him forward.
Certainly, thank you.
If you just state your name and then tell me about.
You're just asking.
My name is Joseph Galino, Vice President of Land Development for Bill Beasley Homes, 7009 Evanstown Center Boulevard. How you doing there, Commissioner Cyrus? We meet again.
Mr. Galina.
Yeah.
I'm not fighting you on this one. What I want to know,
you're not.
I want to know some clarification here. We're talking about putting that many homes on one lot or many units, or your main goal to have 4 units per acre, or is that the exception to the rule?
Well, as Mr. Sherman said, they're actually townhouse units. Okay. So you're putting them a little closer together. It's not like you think in residential, single family detached housing. It's 4 units per building, and there's, I believe, 9 buildings.
And it'll average out 2.67 units per acre.
Yeah, and it'll average out to about 2.67 units per acre when you do the whole thing.
All right, that sounds better. Secondly, will the streets within this area be public roads?
It is our intention for them to be public. They'll be built to Augusta standards.
Street lights and sidewalks included?
Excuse me, sir?
Street lights and sidewalks included?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I don't want to have to get a petition to get that. That should be already there. Again, thank you. I move to approve.
Gotcha. Hold on. Everybody just hold on. All right, we got a motion to approve. All right, Commissioner from the 6th. I'm waiting on the second. Commissioner from the 6th.
Second.
Commissioner Cyrus, just like to ask you for clarification, because it's your agenda item here. It has, just like we just changed the language, and it's the one that Mr. Sherman came from minutes ago. We changed some things, and he's got 4 lots per acre here, which will qualify him, if my math is correct, a little bit more than what he's talking about. He's about 36, 37 or whatever. 9 with, I guess, with 4 units in there. And he said that'd be about 2.5 houses on an acre, if I'm not mistaken. Can you put that in there as a 4 lots per acre? I mean, to kind of put those restrictions in there to know what to expect. Are you comfortable with what you just voted on, what you just made a motion on?
May I respond, Mayor?
Proceed, sir. Directed to the chair.
That's right.
I did address the chair.
You did. I should have told the commissioner from the 6th the same thing.
I apologize, Mr. Mayor. You're exactly right.
Don't
Come
try
on,
to-
Commissioner from the fourth.
All right.
All right,
Okay.
my friend.
I
Yeah.
can, I've had a lot of dealing with Mr. Galena, and so I'm gonna accept what he and Mr. Sherman is saying, but I will be out there with my tape measure, and I would like to see that wetland made beautiful, because right now it's kind of ugly, and I don't want to have to fuss with the folks out there in the area that they built houses on the swamp. So it's going to require some work, and Mr. Sherman, I expect y'all to make sure that that's addressed as to how we get that area looking presentable. Maybe, is that a retention point or just a swampy area, Mr. Sherman?
The retention pond. Yeah, it is a retention pond.
So y'all gonna have to work on that, Ms. Galeno, and I look forward to a good product. Well, thanks to my comment from my colleague, I'm going to entrust some trust in these two here.
Okay.
All right. Did you get a second on your motion?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Mr. Frenham, Mr. Sias and Mr. Frenham.
That's correct, Madam Clerk. Voting.
Mr. Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Frenham,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes.
Mr. Sun,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right. All right. I'm going to go to the addendum item, and I want to call up item number 1 from the addendum item, and that's to receive an update from the Homelessness Initiative, Finding a Way Home. Madam Clerk, I'll turn it over to you if you just can't read that for the record.
Item number 1 from our addendum agenda, receive an update from the Homelessness Initiative, Finding a Way Home, requested by Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I believe we've got representatives from HCD. Jeff, I'm not sure, but I'd like to know if we've got a representative from the Sheriff's Office here as well. They've been involved, as we understand it, homelessness related activities. So hopefully they are here in attendance as well.
At the moment, I don't see one, Mayor.
All right, and our HCD representative.
Mr. Dunlap.
No, I think Mr. Evans Dunlap is.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Wrong, Daniel. I don't see Mr. Evans.
I believe this is Mr. Evans on the phone.
Mayor, I believe that might be Evan Joseph.
Mr. Lewis, I think they're all in the waiting room now under Mr. Welcher.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I don't see Mr. Welcher either in the waiting room.
I don't see them either. Again, we can get them on, that would be helpful. We just want to, we want to get an update as it relates to this matter. I, like many of you, saw for the first time the report about the individual who passed away during the Christmas holidays, the homeless individual, and wanted to get an update from HCD and others as it relates to this. All right, Madam Clerk, we'll put this on the agenda item for February 2nd.
Okay,
Okay,
all right.
thank you. All right. All right, at this point, I'm going to call up Miller Edwards from Malden and Jenkins to provide us with an audit report update from 2019's audit. All right. Again, we've got Miller Edwards with us from Malden and Jenkins with our 2019 finance and compliance audit. Miller?
Yes, sir. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Well, what I want to do today was just cover a few things with you. I think someone else is going to manage the presentation for me, and I'll just do the talking. So you can see the purpose of today's presentation is just to cover a few things with you relative to the annual audit of the Augusta Richmond County government. There's a lot of numbers to go through, and I've tried to summarize them in a fashion that might be something good to present to you all today. I do think you look at the financial statements, I think there's a lot of good to take note of, and I'll try to walk you through that as well. If the person on the other end could go ahead and advance the slide, that'd be great. Okay, and you can keep on going. Some of these slides right through here are just talk about the firm, and considering the medium that we're using today, let's just keep on going. If the person over on the other side could maybe go to, let me see, slide number 6. 6 in the corner. There we go. All right, well, again, today, things that I want to make sure everybody follows on this is, if you're auditing someone, the whole idea is to express an opinion. And that is what I'm here today to share with you, is what our opinions are relative to the audit. Number one, the financial statements, your comprehensive annual financial report, which the industry refers to as a CAFR. I'm happy to tell you that we do believe that the financial statements do present fairly in all material respects the situation as it exists in the city of Augusta as of 12/31/19. We also have to do an audit of your federal awards program, whereby you all have taken a lot of funds, actually about $27.5 million worth of funds from the federal government during that year. And we audited about half of that, actually a little over half, about 15.3 million. We followed the rules of the game. We picked the DOT projects that you all had, and we went through there and tested those projects for compliance. And I'm happy to give you all a thumbs up that you were able to demonstrate to us that you had good controls and good management of those programs, and that we were able to give you a clean report on your federal program. So those are the two places where you expect to have an opinion provided by the auditor. And in your case, again, the audit report is clean. If we could go to the next slide. This document that has been prepared for you all is, again, called a CAFR. And you all have been doing this now for 5 years. Previous to that, you all had never done one. And a CAFR is something that takes a lot of work. There's a lot of information in there. For those who are so interested and so inclined to read, this CAFR has about 10 years worth of data included in it. You can go back and see how we compared to the years before within the decade, and see how things look today compared to the past. That's in the statistical section of this, which again is a very lengthy part of the overall document. You have been recognized for your efforts. The GFOA, which is the largest trade association of governments in this country, has reviewed your document and has each year given you all this certificate for achievement in excellence in financial reporting. So again, that's a great thing, a great place to be. If we could, let's go to the entity-wide slide that I've got that follows. In case you didn't know it, Augusta, Georgia is actually a pretty big local government. When you look at everything and you add up all the numbers, you all have over $2 billion, and that's with a B, $2 billion worth of assets. Now, I want to make sure everybody understands that's not in cash, but about $1.5 billion, meaning about 3/4 of your assets are in capital assets. You know, all the roads, the bridges, the culverts, the facilities, the equipments, the vehicles, everything that you've got has an accumulated depreciated value of about $1.5 billion. So a big operation that I'll touch on the capital assets element of it again shortly. You've got about $950 million worth of liabilities. In those liabilities, you've got long-term debts, you've got bonds, you've got notes payable. You've also got a large amount of pension and other post-employment benefits liabilities included in there, about $224 million worth, just having to do with healthcare benefits that you're providing to your retired people and your pension plan. You add those two together, it's about $225 million. In the end, you've got a balance sheet that shows that you are in an equity position. That, of course, is always important. You've got about $1.15 billion equity there at the community. That, again, is a great thing to see. When you look at the operations of the government this past year, and when I say the government, I'm talking about the government including your utilities, your airport, all those things that are wrapped up as part of your umbrella of authority. You all had just short of $500 million worth of revenues. You had about $433 million worth of expenses, which ended up with a net result of $62 million. So again, just looking at that alone, that one slide, I see a good situation. We've got a strong balance sheet. We're in good equity position. We had a good year's worth of revenues versus expenses to end up with a bottom line of $62 million. Now, if we could go to the next slide, I want to reconcile that 62 million. Some people might look at that and say, well, that's too high, that's too low, whatever it might be. The fact of the matter is, a government like Augusta that has so many initiatives and so many contingencies and so many things happening all the time, I think it's important to have a strong bottom line when you look at the big picture at the entity-wide level. If you take that same $62 million and you add the $53 million of depreciation expense that you had back to the number, if you look at the long-term debts that you all had, you all went out there this year and took on a net increase in your long-term debts, about $49 million. And then you subtract from that what you spend on capital assets, about $11 million a month you all are spending on capital assets, about $133 million. It takes money to spend money, and you all spend a lot of money on capital assets, which is not expensed in that number that I arrived at 62 million. So it's not in that 433 million of expense. It's something that you had to spend separate from the income statement. That gave you a reconciled bottom line of about 31 million. And I think, again, that is a healthy place to be. When you consider the fact that you've got SPLOST funds, fire protection funds, and those kind of funds that collect revenues to be spent in the future, 31 million is a reasonable bottom line to have when you look at this perspective. I mean, your SPLOST fund alone, your primary SPLOST fund has about 42 million of fund balance in it. I'm sure that is planned and budgeted to be spent in future years, but it took money to make money. And again, you're in a good place when you look at the entity-wide perspective. If you just stand back and say, how are we doing overall? Augusta's in a pretty good place to be as of the end of the year. If we could go to the next slide. When you dive into the general fund, which is the heart and soul of any government, you've got about $53 million worth of assets, a little about 13.5 million of liabilities, a fund balance of about 39 million, which is about 3 months worth. When you look at that 39 million, you compare that to the 158 and in expenses, then you're probably about 90 days worth of fund balance. Again, a good place to be, nothing to brag about, but nothing to complain about. It's kind of just a good, happy median of a place to be. Looking down below that line, you can see the revenues were about 161.5 million, and your expenses were about 158.2. You had a bottom line of about 3.4 million increase to fund balance, which again, I think is a good thing, good place to be. If someone was to sit here and ask me, Miller, what do you think our fund balance ought to be? Considering you're at 12/31 year in and the majority of your property taxes are typically collected by that point, I would say 90 days, it'd be nice to see that be 120. It'd be nice to see that be 150. Because of the seasonality of the revenue stream in any local government in Georgia, it's important to always measure yourself at the right time and consider what the balance of fund balance and assets and those kind of things need to be. Being you're at 12/31, I think you ought to have a very strong fund balance, especially when I consider all the initiatives that you all have going. If we could go to the next slide. The next slide shows a pie chart, and it gives you a little bit of an idea about where our revenues came from. The big blue slice is property taxes. The purple slice is other taxes, and we're talking taxes like local option sales tax, things like that. You can see the two primary revenue streams are related to taxes. We do have licenses and permits and other things that follow, but of our revenues, of that 160 million some odd dollars, a good 120 million of that was in the form of some kind of tax, property or other taxes. Going to the next page, the next slide, you can see our expenditures. And as I would always expect, you've got a very large slice in public safety. Public safety is the largest of your expenditures, and that's the way it is in every government. It's right where it usually is. When I look at larger governments, whether it's looking at Atlanta, Macon, Columbus, Athens, whatever it might be, your public safety is always the big slice, and it is here as well. But this gives you a little taste of what our expenditures were in the general fund this past year. So if we could, let's keep on going to the next slide. Your general fund revenues and expenditures. This gives you a little analysis of the last 6 years about what's been transpiring. The green columns are considered to be your revenues. The red is your expenses. You can see for the last 5 years, we've had an increase in fund balance each year. I think this is healthy. This is a good thing. Again, if you were in a community that had no initiatives, nothing going on, a stagnant economy, community that doesn't want a lot of things, and I might say that's too much, but you got a lot of things going on here. And I think the fund balance needs to grow commensurate with the growth in expenses. Notice how just the last 3 years alone, the expenses, the red bars in 17, 18, and 19, how much they've grown. To be proactive in being able to accommodate that growth in services, it takes a growth in fund balance. So again, I can't emphasize that enough when looking at Augusta. The next slide gives you another picture of the same kind of information. You can see in 2014, you actually had a use of fund balance of about 7 million. And then it's been going up at a healthy rate over the last few years. Again, you can see the 3.4 million I talked about earlier. That's to the far right-hand side. So again, 5 straight years of a healthy addition to fund balance. And I would recommend to continue trying to do that as you all continue into the future. The next slide looks at it another way and looks at your fund balance as compared to overall expenditures. And what I'd like to do is see the red line and the blue line as close together as possible. You can see the closest we got was probably around 17, where the line of the blue line had come down with expenditures. And what that's trying to show you is how fund balance relates to expenditures of the government, of the general fund. Remember, I mentioned earlier about having about 1/4 of the year or 90 days worth of fund balance. That's what that 39 million is below as compared to the 152 million above on the far right-hand side. That relationship is very important to always consider how our fund balance is relative to our overall expenditures. So that pretty much covers the general fund. One thing I do want to mention when it comes to the general fund is your budget to actual. You all did very well on the budget side of life for the general fund this past year. Your general fund had about $3 million additional revenues than budgeted. And you all also pulled in the belt strap and spent just short of 10 million less than what was budgeted, which helped you have that increase to fund balance. You ended up having about a $13 million swing on the budget. That was a positive swing. And you don't get to see that every year. You don't get to see that too often. But this past year, we did see that. So again, that was a nice thing to see. If we could, let's go to the next slide. And what you have here is I'm leaving the general fund. I'm going to talk about a few of your other major and more significant operations. And before I even do that, let me just mention something for those who may or may not know. When I talk about the fact you're a large government, I don't want that to get lost in what I'm trying to say. You all have about 66 funds. That's 66 sets of books that you all are trying to manage. That includes your constitutional offices like your sheriff, your tax commissioner, and those types. It includes, again, water, sewer, the airport, all of those other special revenue funds. Again, 66 different sets of books that have to roll up to become Augusta Richmond County. So again, I thought that'd be interesting to just note here. When looking at the special sales tax phase 7 financial statements, you've got about $42 million worth of fund balance, meaning to me that you've got a pretty good amount reserved for spending in future years on all these various capital projects that you all have. This past year, you spent about 4.1 million more than you took in. You took in about 42.1 and you spent 46.2. That's normal. That is nothing to be worried about. Oftentimes, spending of SPLOST monies can be very different from receiving the SPLOST money. So again, this looks very good to me. The next slide dives into fire protection, another one of your more significant operations. You've got fund balance there of about 21 million. You took in about 31 million of revenues and you spent just over 28 million for a $2.5 million increase in fund balance. So that looks good as well. The water sewer utilities fund is one of your largest funds. It is probably the largest fund, even larger than the general fund in some respects. You've got a very large operation there. You can see you've got about $700 million worth of assets. About 570 of that is in capital assets, meaning all your infrastructure and facilities. You do have a sizable amount of debt, about 516 million. You all have been going to the bond market a lot over the last decade to either refund bonds or take in some new money to provide for all the infrastructure improvements that you all are doing. At the end of the day, though, you've got about $183 million equity position. And again, that's a good place to be. This past year, you took in about $99 million worth of revenues and you spent about 91 million of expenses for an increase of 8 million. And again, just like I went through before, we were reconciling that 62 million for the entity wide. This 8 million is very important because the 8 million is what you're going to use to pay back debt and to be able to continue to invest in your infrastructure. You know, I like to equate things like our own personal lives. If I'm making 50,000 a year and I need to put in a new roof, Uncle Sam doesn't let me expense the roof. It's got to come out of my own reserves. The same thing is true here. You've got to have reserves to spend it on capital expenditures, whether it's a new roof or a new pipeline, whatever it might be. You've got to have the funds to do it. And the water sewer fund had a good year of doing just that. The next slide is your airport. And as I've said to you all in the past, I'm very impressed by the airport. It is a beautiful facility and it runs very well also. When you look at the operation, a lot of it's been federally subsidized. That was the case this past year as well. This past year, if you look on that couple of rows at the bottom, you took in about 35 million of revenue, but 17 million of that was contributions that came from the federal government as part of all kind of other enhancements and improvements you're doing there. At the end of the day, you had a $17 million increase in net position. That was primarily what was given to you in the form of those contributions. Otherwise, the operation was pretty break even, but had a good year nonetheless and a lot of improvements being made. So things look good there at the airport from a financial statement standpoint. The next slide looks at your garbage collection financial statements. And let me just say something here that I said to management we had a month ago or a few weeks ago with your new city manager. Very seldom do I get to see where garbage collection has made money. And the last row that you see on here is that the garbage collection made 1.3 million, and that's a good thing. Again, I seldom ever see that. And what that means to me is you're collecting an appropriate amount of funds from the users of your garbage collection. Your expenses were 19.8, you took in 21.1, you had about a $1.3 million increase. That's a good thing. I'd love to see you keep that up if you can. I understand that that can be difficult to do, but again, very few times do I get to see a bottom line that's positive when it comes to garbage collection. The next slide looks at stormwater, which is a relatively new operation in local governments. You all this past year took in about 13.7 million. and you spend about 12.9. So stormwater is funding itself. That's a good thing. You know, you want to see all these funds fund themselves as much as possible. You'd rather not see the general fund having to subsidize them. Stormwater is doing a fine job right now, best that we can tell. The next slide is one of my final ones from a financial standpoint that I want to just bring to your attention. Included in your financial statements and not included in that 2.1 billion and all the other liabilities, completely separate from all numbers we've talked about thus far, is your pension and your other post-employment benefits. And you're funded around 80% on your pension funds. You've got three primary ones, the 1945, the 1949, the GMEBS plan. This does not include two insignificant plans that don't have a lot of activity in the city employees plan and the 1998 plan. But when you take those three plans together, you're about 80% funded. That's not a bad place to be. That's where I'm seeing a lot of governments be, somewhere between 80, 82, 83, you all around 80. I think that's a good place to be. You're better than somebody, when you look at your pension plan, you're better than a lot of your fellow governments here in Georgia. When I look at places like Macon has $115 million liability. You all have 68 million. When you add up those first three columns that are in the red row that says net liability, that adds up to about 68 million. Macon's at 115, Columbus is at 181, and Athens Clark is at 55. Of course, those are the four primary consolidated governments here in Georgia. The OPEB plan is your health care plan. Again, when people retire from Augusta, they're going to be covered under a health care plan that helps them make ends meet until the federal government plans come into play. You all right now have about $155.5 million liability. You have no funds currently set aside for that. So that's going to be something that's going to have to be dealt with going forward.
Yeah, go ahead and send me the little letter. I'll send it back because I'm on a commission meeting right now.
Okay, I thought I heard something. You've got about $156 million liability. Now, again, how that compares, you look at Macon, Columbus, and Athens Clark, all of them have a very large amount of money that they are going to have to expend over the future. You all have nothing set aside. Macon's only got about 3 million set aside. Macon's got 139 million net liability. Columbus has about a $58 million net liability, but Athens Clark has a net liability of $334 million. So you all are doing much better than Athens Clark, and you're very reasonably recorded here as compared to somewhere like Macon. Augusta's a little bit bigger than Macon. It's a bigger government. It has a lot more going on, and for it to be sitting here with 156 million roughly of an OPEB liability compared to Macon's 139, I think you're in a good place right there. But just don't forget about it. It's the real thing I wanted to say here. That last little percentage that has dash, 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 we have no funding set aside for that. And this means that we're going to really feel it on our cash flows as we go out over the next 20 and 30 years. So just keep that in mind. On the next slide, I'm going to just basically say we had nothing come up this past year that required us to have to go get any kind of consultations with an outside party. There were no significant judgments and estimates that required us to go get expertise. We did maintain our independence. That's always important, that we understand we're the auditor and that the client is the auditee, and that your management did a good job of closing out and helping us maintain that independence that is so very important in this relationship. So again, I want to just let you know that. The next slide gets into 6 different management points that we have to share with you all today. This is on slide number 24. And one of the points we've seen in the past is over at the sheriff's office, and that is that they've got some unclaimed property that probably needs to be remitted to the state of Georgia. It's called the escheat laws. And when you've got property in the form of checks, things of that kind that have not been claimed, we don't get to just throw those back into our revenues or throw those back into our fund balances. Under state law, we have to actually treat that as unclaimed property and work through the escheat laws of Georgia. And all we would do is recommend that the sheriff's office get with someone to go through those laws and determine what needs to be done at this time. We are not aware of anything having been done there to address that situation. Item number 2 has to do with another constitutional office, the magistrate and the civil court and the probate court. When you look at it all together, there were excess funds of about $133,000. Now, what do I mean by that is they collect a lot of deposits. They collect a lot of funds, but every dollar that they collect, they owe to somebody. I mean, think about it this way, like the tax commissioner. The tax commissioner collects all these property taxes, and then they owe it to the city, county, they owe it to the Board of Education, et cetera. None of that belongs to the tax commissioner. Well, the same thing's true in the court system. And when you look at these courts, there was an excess of amounts recorded for assets that they were not aware of who they owed the money to. And while that's not a material amount, when you look at the overall operations of a $500 million operation of this size, it is significant enough for me to mention it to you all today, and for someone to maybe reach out to magistrate civil and to probate and try to work with them to see what needs to be done to address that and get that number a lot closer, if not make it zero. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. The next slide goes through another management point. This one you all do have a great deal of control over. You've got 3 funds that have deficits that include the special assessment or streetlights fund. You've got a convention center fund, and then your housing neighborhood development fund. When you look at all that together, you probably add it up, there's probably about $4.5 million that is deficits in those funds. And we would like the community, the government, to work really hard to either determine if we need to raise our fees, if we need to reduce our cost, if at all possible, or if it's time for the general fund to go ahead and supply the supplement needed. Whenever I see a deficit at a special revenue fund, oftentimes that says to me the general fund needs to come to the rescue. And I think that's where we are right now at Augusta. We really need to look at those 3 funds in particular and decide what we need to do to correct the situation there. And again, I've talked to management about this, but I wanted to bring it to your attention today as well. The 4th item that we have is on the next slide is segregation of duties. Back to the probate, civil, and magistrate, you do have situations there that you've got single individuals that perform most of the accounting duties. This is not unusual. We see this in a lot of governments. We audit about 60 county governments, and of those 60, just about every one of them have some kind of point made to them every year about segregation of duties. It is something that we do take seriously, and we certainly would like to see if maybe there could be some efforts made in those 2 courts that could address the concerns about single individuals doing something that is of significance to that office. And we would like to recommend that to you all as well. On the next slide, we've got 2 more points to mention to you all today. Maintaining capital assets. You saw earlier that I mentioned that you all had about $133 million worth of capital outlay activity this past year. We also noted that you've got over $1.5 billion worth of depreciated capital assets. This is a big part of Augusta, and we would recommend that more attention be given to that part of your overall accounting on an interim basis, and maybe make interim adjustments and just make sure everything's in better shape, which would provide for more timely and proper closeout. Right now, it's pretty much a Herculean effort at the end of the year. Management has to kind of go through an entire year to figure out what needs to be capitalized, what does not need to be capitalized, what did we trade in, what should come off the list. It's a big effort, and I'm recommending to management that they consider trying to do more interim work on this matter rather than let it be such a Herculean year-end closeout effort. So the last thing we've got has to do with petty cash. And I don't want this to get blown out of proportion, but when we started looking at all the various petty cash accounts that was maintained across all government offices and departments, we just think you all ought to take a look at it and see what is the proper amount that any one office or department or fund should have for petty cash. Again, it's not material. It's not, in some respects, you could even say it's not significant across the board, but it's large enough for me that I would like someone to take a look at it to determine if it's where it needs to be or if it should be at another level. And after asking questions of various people, that presented us with this recommendation that we consider this at the government level. Other than that, the only thing I want to let you know is there's a lot of new standards. I think I'd have to tell you that probably every year. If the other side could click it one more time, I think you might have everything. There we go. you've got a lot of new requirements that are coming out in the next couple of years. This year that's going to be closed out soon is going to have several new pronouncements. There's new ones for 21 and 22 and 23, and there's 6 other pronouncements or standards that are going to be effective in years that follow. The GASB is not sitting still right now. They are writing a lot of standards. And I think it's important for Augusta to always make sure that it's on top of all these new standards. And I don't want to imply that Augusta is not. I think overall Augusta is always in good shape as far as staying on top of this. But this is my way of letting you know at the commission level that there's a lot of things coming down the pipe that are going to change the way you report things in the future. With that being said, the last slide is my final slide, and I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be of service to you, and also to see if there's any kind of questions or thoughts that anyone on this commission would like to share today.
Thank you, Miller, for your presentation. I believe we may have a series of questions that want to be asked. All right, Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 6th. You're muted, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for, I thank Miller for the awesome presentation. Appreciate you bringing us up to date and giving us some things that may concern you in the long haul. And I won't misquote the language that they use in saying that. But I'd like just body would consider those last few slides that he presented to us, that some things that we need to make some adjustments, that we let our administrator take a look at those in a very reasonable amount of time and come back with us some suggestions about how we want to approach those things and try to get it so we can get them under control or get them in a better place so we can try to remove some of the concerns about them, whether that was something about the Coliseum Authority or whatever, right, in different funds. So I'd like to see us try to look at that. I know I can remember vividly pretty much last time you were here, you was also talking about some of the checks and things that was over in the sheriff department when you do. So we haven't done anything about that as of right now as well. So I'd like the minister to take a look at that in a reasonable amount of time, to come back and make some recommendations to all of those things, those last few slides that seems to give you some concern as an auditor for us. And thank you very much for the information.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, Commissioner from the 6th, I would agree with you 100% with one note in addition to that. This is the work that the Finance Committee really needs to be involved in. We've talked about it for a number of years, that the Finance Committee needs to take on this broader role of helping to get the city to a better place as it relates to these types of matters. So I would encourage the committee chairman for finance to be involved in those conversations. I'm going to recognize the commissioner from the 8th, and then I'm going to the 4th. The 8th, then the 4th.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Mr. Edwards.
All right, please go.
I appreciate the report that you gave, and it looks pretty similar to the previous years. Although I think in previous years we've gotten this report a little earlier in the year, correct?
Yes.
Is there a reason why on the delay this year?
COVID created a very significant distraction by all governments. It hit right about the time that we're usually in the course of getting the audit going. We did get a lot of it done back in the spring, rolling into the summer. But then the CARES Act and everything that came along the same time as us, I would say probably took priority. And I think, in some respects, I think it should take priority. I mean, it was a large, think about how significant it is. We've never seen anything like this in any of our lifetime, where the entire country was preoccupied with having to deal with this. And Augusta was definitely preoccupied with it. So we were asked by management if we could just hold tight until they could get through a few things, and then let's go ahead and get the audit back on track. And that's what we did. Okay, well, I appreciate that. How many years has Malden and Jenkins been doing this audit for Augusta? I want to say around 8, something like that. Okay, all righty. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner from the 4th.
Thank you, sir. And hello again, Mr. Edwards. Again, thank you for a great presentation. I have about 3 questions for you. Number 1, what kind of planning would you recommend that we prepare for in our audit for the pandemic year? what kind of recommendations do you have? We did receive a lot of federal funding for various issues under the CARES Act. What would be your recommendation to us? That's my first question that we prepare for the audit.
Well, the first thing I'd say on when it comes to the CARES Act and all these issues that came with it, all I can tell you is the rules of the game seem to always be changing. I think it's important that Augusta make sure that it's got a management team that's on top of all these different hurdles and loopholes and things that you've got to make sure you do right. And I think you've done that in talking with the various people there at the government. It feels like fiscal year 2020 that is just finished should be in pretty good shape. And I think every time I've talked, I know Tim and Donna in particular have attended a lot of sessions that our firm has taught relative to the CARES Act and what needs to be done and not done. I know they have also reached out to us to ask some of our experts that are involved in that situation. And they've had a lot of dialogue, and I know they've done more than they've done a lot more outside of Malden and Jenkins too. So all I can say is that it's important for this government to stay really on top of how those funds need to be spent. The last thing we want to do is find out that we took monies, we spent monies, and then we got to turn it back in because we didn't spend it right. That's the biggest risk I see under the CARES Act.
Okay, my second question is, about the outside agencies and these funds that should be refunded whatever the process to get rid of them. The Finance Committee will definitely be involved with that and working with the administrator and these agencies. My question on it is, in your experience, many of these officers these are judges and constitutional officers.
Right.
What kind of results have you seen from other governments who went out to correct that problem? As you say, many of us have it. So can you share us any insight as to how other governments, what was their results from trying to solve this?
Unfortunately, the answer I'm going to give you is not a good one. There's a lot of pushback oftentimes by constitutional offices when the greater government board of commissioners wants to reach out and help. I have seen environments where it has been acceptable and that the board of commissioners office, the finance people can get involved and help figure out better ways, even play a mitigating control from time to time and do the ones reviewing and looking at reconciliations on behalf of. It takes, as in life itself, it takes both sides to work together and understand that it's the effort is for the common good and to help everybody be in a better place. That's not always well communicated, it seems like, amongst the 60 some odd governments that we audit that are counties. But you know, you look at funding, you look at all those kind of things, you say, what is it going to take XYZ office for you to have the right kind of people in place, the right kind of structure. And it may mean from time to time that someone comes back to you and says, the XYZ court or the XYZ office actually needs another person to balance the segregation of duties issues, to take care of all these kind of problems that we're talking about. Again, it takes both sides to really want to work together and try to be on the same side. But again, it's not always done that way.
Thank you. It was my expectation that was going to be a heavy lift. That's why I don't want to send the administrator out on his own dealing with that, because it's going to be an issue. So we're going to definitely need to work together from our perspective.
I agree.
Okay. All right. I thank you. Thank you very much, Mia. And Mr. Edwards, again, thank you for your great presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. Anyone else? All right. Commissioner from the South. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, great presentation. My question is for Mr. Edwards. Mr. Edwards, all the municipalities you talked about during your presentation, does Malden and Jenkins work with them?
Yes.
Okay. And of those municipalities, how many of them are calendar year versus July 1 to June 30th budget cycle?
Let me see. On the ones I mentioned to you, Macon is 6:30, Columbus is 6:30, and Athens is 6:30. There's no doubt that across this entire state that June 30th is the year end that a lot of governments use. However, it's not my favorite year end because I think it's really kind of trying to close out and report something in the middle of a cycle versus at the end or the beginning of a cycle. Cobb County has a 9/30 year end. Gwinnett County has a 12/31 year end. Those two are AAA rated counties. So is Forsyth County. They're AAA rated too, and we audit them. But those governments are, to me, reporting at the right time. A 9/30 year end, you're skinny as a rail. You haven't taken in property taxes yet. It's a good time to take a look at where we are as we go into the next season. A 12/31, such as yourself in Gwinnett County and Forsyth County, that's also a good time to take a look at things because you collected a bounty of property taxes. You know where you stand on January 1st. Now let's go through the next calendar year to spend it. This idea of using the June 30 year end, which again, most governments do. Maybe I'm by myself when I say this, but a lot of governments do that because that's the state of Georgia's fiscal year end. But if you think about it, the state of Georgia, the greater government of the state, they've got a different seasonality of revenues. They have something called income taxes. And so for them to collect income taxes on April 15th, they've got the bounty of their revenues. June 30 is a good time for the state. And that's why we hear a lot of people, though, at the local government level say they want to have a June 30 because the state does. But there's a disconnect there. Again, to me, the best year end is a 9/30. The second best year end is a 12/31. And I think it just makes for a cleaner cutoff for trying to then gauge the activities of a cycle that follows.
Thank you. I appreciate that candid feedback as well. So thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right, Bill, well, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you. I do appreciate it.
Okay, Madam Clerk, I believe that leaves us with the following remaining items. Item number 2 from the addendum agenda, item number 19 from the regular agenda, item 20, and then item 25 and 26 and 28.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. Item number 19.
Okay. Item number 19 is a motion to approve Quintech Maintenance Building Demolition Agreement with Augusta Regional Airport in the amount of $20,250.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Voting.
All right, have a good.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Franum,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes.
Mr. Sun,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight. You're muted, Ms. McKnight.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Ms. Scott. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Mr. Sayers,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries unanimously.
Item number 25.
Item 25 is to consider a request from the Board of Assessors to recover, maintain funding for the Department of Revenue Certification Adjustment Staff Development Initiative.
I believe that is
Mr. Mayor.
Chief Tax Assessor Ross. All right, Chair recognizes Mayor Pro Tem. State inquiry.
Well, I was just going to say, I was kind of trying to work with that, and we took it to the administrator, so I think the administrator should have something to say about it.
Well, I intend to recognize all the parties.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. All right. All right, we're going to recognize the tax assessor, chief tax assessor, and then we'll come back to the administrator and then the mayor pro tem to speak on the matter. Okay. All right. Our tax appraiser, Mr. Ross, you're.
Mr. Mayor, Council, if I might get a screen share, please, sir.
I believe that may be you trying to share the screen. I'm not sure what it is you want to share with us, but.
At this point, Mr. Mayor, may I indicate that we're back before the commission that worked with the Board of Assessors last year in maintaining DOR certification adjustments.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Can you suspend for just a minute? Let's just get clarified what it is you want to put on the screen. I'm gonna give you an opportunity to do that if you want to put that up. I believe you've been given the opportunity to do that.
Can you see that screen, Mr. Mayor? Oh God, get it back.
Not sure what just happened, but. All right, why don't you expand that all the way, open it up. Okay.
This is the communication with myself and the administrator relative to this matter that goes back once we became aware of the adopted budget.
Okay.
Without going into all the gory details of it. This is the conversation that goes with finance going back to this matter once we became aware of it. I'd like to point out here that we've been advised by finance that this amount, $1,971,760, was approved by the commissions in the salary line items. However, we went through a reorg as well as.
More than he helps sometimes. Cause this one.
Yep. Mr. Ross, continue.
This was the actual calculated amount, even though we did the reorg, we had departure of the deputy chief appraiser as well as a long-standing serving employee. And so this amount, 53,324, was a positive surplus left into the salary line. The amount for DOR certification was defunded in its full amount of $75,000. And what we attempted to do is say, well, there's the 53,000+ that's already in salary. However, it was not designated for DOR certification, and therefore it is an option that only the commission could make adjustments to. The actual salary line item of the $1,171,760 is referenced in the GL 2021 budget.
Mr. Ross.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, continue.
We'd like to point out also, let me enlarge this one, that in the 2020 budget, that the unspent revenues for 2020 is coming in at north of 148,700. That is the Tax Assessors budget, and the surplus in the Board of Assessors is above 21,000. This gives you a quick summary. The $75,000 necessary. The 51 calculation that's already in the salary line, we're short of 23,766. I've also calculated with a 15% benefit factor that total amount is actually 27,331. If you subtract that amount from the amount that's being not spent in 2020, still leaves a carryover balance of north of 121,000. On behalf of the board, we're back saying again, in 2013, the board gave up all part-time for this necessary staff development. In 2020, when we came to you, we gave up a full-time position and benefits to maintain the funding. And we're back at 2021 again, being defunded through the budgetary process. We were not defunded during our presentation, nor was it indicated to us that would be the case. I would point out also that even though we were asked to drop 25% in training and education, the Board of Assessors used $10,000 to cover COVID in this operation. We had no other place to pull it early on in this process. However, the budget process started $10,000 short. So in that amount, even before they deducted, they had already reduced it 10,000. We also like to point out that there's the 51,234 difference in what was going on. We certainly have no control over pension costs and health insurance. Those are major shifts that we saw. What the Board of Assessors is simply asking for, it is necessary to have talented people in the midst of a conversion going to a more sophisticated CAML system. We're down here reappraising, trying to get through all property types. We've added over $1.1 billion to the digest last year. Certainly there are other issues that the board considers, the commission considers in rolling back. One, you have no flexibility in that 7% limitation. However, handicapping the Board of Assessors is going to create issues for you. And I would hate to put you in a position that 3-4 years out, when we're not meeting the challenge of a digest and penalties and fines start to surface before you, that you're starting now to want to reallocate funding to keep the board proper. As I jokingly mentioned, we didn't ask for $2 billion. We just asked to maintain the funding necessary to keep a staff capable of making the Board of Assessors meet this annual challenge. Certainly, I'm open to any questions, Mr. Mayor and Commissioner.
All right, I'm going to ask the first question, and then I want to hear from the administrator. What is it you're specifically asking for, Mr. Ross?
We're asking that the 51,234 that's currently in the salary line be used for DOR certification. That's
So
not
we're not
active.
we're not talking about any new money. It's existing money that's there. Is that correct?
That's existing money that's already there. That is correct.
Okay.
What we're asking for is the supplement of the shortfall of the 475. Salary and benefits come to 27,331. And we're suggesting that the 2020 not spent revenue is sufficient in your rollover to your reserves to cover that difference. So the 51,234 and the 27 is the, well, actually this is already in, and asking for those additional revenues to fund DOR certification adjustments.
Okay, so what you're specifically asking for is about $73,000.
28.
I'm actually for 27,331, and then the use of already allocated funds to cover the rest.
All right, very well. I just want to make sure that everyone's understanding. All right, Administrator Donald, and then I'm going to come back to the Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, so I believe that Mr. Ross is spoken with both finance and myself, and clear understanding that he has a need for a little under 28,000. I think there might have been a little confusion, and maybe it was on my part. I actually thought that we were asking the commission to take cost savings projected for 2021 and then rolling those over into the salary line item. From my understanding, and still fairly new to Augusta, but your 2020 books are not officially closed yet, and you haven't reallocated funds or anything from that area. So I'd have to call Miss Donna Williams in, who I know is in the waiting room, to kind of talk about that a little bit more in depth. And maybe that is where the confusion is. I know we talked about during our correspondence that there was some funding in the operational line item, and that would need to come before the commission, because you can move in between line items of personnel, but you cannot move in between line items from operating in the personnel without a commission action. And so if that is the case, I don't remember the line item that we discussed, Mr. Ross, but there was a small amount of cost savings that covered it from the operational side that was going to move. That could be utilized. It was one of the
Mr. Donna,
options that you gave.
right, Mr. Donna, what we spoke of is because we made a decision that we could use, we could use a portion of posting.
That's what it was, yeah.
We could reduce that by 20,000. We decided and got through that it's not necessary to send out notice to residential properties of reval work going on in neighborhoods. We tested that against the 2020, and it worked well for us. We didn't have any more appeals than we normally would get. So one of the things that we did speak of, that we could consider moving $20,000 from postage as a part of that impact to add to the 51. And we would still be just short about $3,500.
Yeah, so I didn't have I apologize, Mayor, I didn't have the information directly in front of me, but I think that would, for the most part, resolve the problem, and then authorize finance to just provide the balance in personnel. So it would be a minor budget adjustment that would need to be made, which I believe that Mr. Ross, after talking to him, finance, and any other party, it's an appropriate expenditure and right sizes them. So I think that's a quality resolution and one that I recommend.
Thank you, sir.
Let me get a motion to that effect. Do we have a motion to approve what the administrator just indicated?
So moved.
All right, I've got a motion from the Mayor Pro Tem. Mayor Pro Tem with the motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
I see your hand. Okay. All right, Commissioner from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two questions. One of them is, I think the administrator might have mentioned it and saying about the closeout from a previous budget, but maybe I missed it previously. But we previously referred to money that was not spent in the previous budget, still made that money available after we bring a new budget online. And I'm asking that because he was saying that there was a difference from the previous budget that did not utilize, and so I think he's counting that in a sense of usage. And I'm asking, is that standard? I know normally we don't do that.
I can speak to that if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor.
Please do.
Yeah, usually, and Augusta may just be different, but if you don't use those funds in the fiscal year, you roll those into the general fund, and that's how you improve that fund balance, which the auditor just highlighted Augusta Richmond County has done a quality job of over the past few years, but needs to continue to do so. And so I would encourage you to look at those books as closed, and then any adjustments that are made in 21 be made leveraging $21.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I'll give you further insight that in every municipality that I've worked in, that last month or so, we start sweeping budgets. Anything that you have not funded in that last month is basically swept and removed and used for your end of the year budget adjustment to make sure that you roll over a positive increase to the fund balance.
Well, thank you. Mr. Mayor, I have one more question, and it's more directed to Mr. Ross, a direct question, and I'll ask by you, Mr. Chair. I just want to know at this particular time, what is Mr. Ross' status? I thought I was under the impression that at the end of the year that he was retiring into his, and that's a great place to be able to retire. And so what is his current status with the Board of Tax Assessors?
Mr. Ross.
Commissioner, I'm still the chief appraiser. My last scheduled work day is January 29. We were in a cold board meeting again with the Board of Assessors this morning. as I've assisted them at their request on this search for a new chief appraiser. Without details, they have selected to interview 6 candidates that have applied. They have selected to close the posting, and hopefully we are getting scheduled to start interviews as early as next week for a potential selection of a new chief appraiser.
Thank you, sir.
I hope I answered that question that you were seeking.
Yeah, just one more part. Was that the date that we were given? And I'm just asking the question. Was that the date that we were given when you notified all of us officially? I'm just asking that question.
I'm not sure when you were notified. The information was shared with the board and forwarded back coming out of the October 12th board meeting.
Right.
When we officially gave the notice to the board, even though we've been discussing this for some time, Mr. Hassan down here, the challenge the board had was we had anticipated, or I had anticipated, nominating the deputy chief, a person of 45 years of service, as the interim chief appraiser. I had made the decision that to enter another contract for 3 more years would take me up to 72. And I wasn't interested in pushing, shall we say, a walker with tennis balls behind it down here. So we had discussed it, and then the deputy chief appraiser decided she was going to go ahead and retire, and we were notified in August. We immediately brought that to the attention of the board, and I thought they were prudent in the fact that they did not wish for the operations to be left without a deputy chief or a chief appraiser. And so their desire requested me to provide them all the options of consideration. I believe I gave them 5. Number 6 would have been my position. You don't have to do anything, but that would have left them in a terrible pit, in my opinion. They chose to move to have 2 deputy chiefs put in place to ensure that authority and operations of the place to meet the challenges that are going on, whether I'm here or not. You got a conversion that's going on. We were back in meetings this morning with IAS World. That was a $4+ million commitment to tie the tax assessors, chief, the tax commissioner, and superior court files all together. So
I think you answered this question well, Mr. Ross. I've got a motion and a second. Voting.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Franum,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hassan,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask for a point of personal privilege for 30 seconds?
You may.
I want to thank your office, Mr. Mayor, the Board of Commissioners, current as well as those prior to this date that have served as well. Thank you for the opportunity to serve and to work with you. I'd like to report to you, in my opinion, that your Board of Assessors is well set now to address the challenges current and for the future. I think that the office is in good hands and prepared to take on the challenges necessary to submit a proper digest annually. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Ross, thank you for your service to the city of Augusta and to her citizens. Your work certainly has been well spoken of across the state of Georgia, as I've heard from many folks in the tax assessors world. And I believe that the liaisons to the Board of Tax Assessors would echo the same as well. My most immediate past Mayor Pro Tem would probably echo those same. In fact, I recognize him now. He's talked much about the work that's going on in the Board of Assessors. All right,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Alvina and your team. I mean, what y'all have done to grow the digest in the last 5 years that I've been here, it's been remarkable. I know we've had some challenges along the way, But just thank you for your service, and we wish you well into retirement.
Thank you, Commissioner Franklin.
All right, thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, that takes us, we've got item number 19 and 25 out of the way. Let's see here.
Item 2026, number 2 on the agenda.
Okay, I want to move quickly. Again, we've got item 2 on the addendum agenda, and let's do this. Let's go ahead and, all right, we're going to go in this order. 2, 20, 26, and 28 in this order. Then we'll call it a day. 2, 20, 26, and 28.
Okay, item number 2 on the addendum agenda, discuss liquor and alcohol license waivers.
Mr. from the 8th.
Thanks, Mayor. I placed this item on the addendum just because there's been some questions that have come up recently about the actions that we took as a commission 2 weeks ago in regards to the alcohol and liquor licenses. During that entire conversation, we were discussing waiving these fees and refunding the fees for 2021 for restaurants and for bars that were closed due to the COVID shutdown. Somehow this has gotten translated into everybody's liquor and alcohol licenses were waived for 2021, including, package stores, convenience stores, big box stores that did not have to close. They were not part of the shutdown. And so I was hoping to just revise what our recommendation was. And I think that, most of the commission understood what we were all discussing, but somewhere the communication failed us. So I want to make a motion that we waive liquor and alcohol fees as discussed previously for restaurants and bars. And that's my motion.
Second.
Second.
Can you add the receipt?
Hang on.
Okay, hold on. Everybody suspend. Everybody suspend. If you'll just raise your hand, we're going to recognize everyone in order and give you a chance. We don't have to talk over one another. All right, I'm going to recognize the commissioner from the 10th.
Yes, sir. We had discussed this a little bit earlier, and I certainly agree with Commissioner Garrett that we need to make this apply to the restaurants and bars that had to shutter their businesses for so long. They were the ones that were hurt. The big box stores, convenience stores, package shops, everybody else with a liquor license was not hurt. They did not have to shut their doors. So I would just like to second the motion that the commissioner from the 8th has placed before us. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Hassan.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hassan.
Oh.
Commissioner Hassan.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead.
All right, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to my colleague, need to put on the front, send the previous action, and the rest of it is fine.
I agree with that, Commissioner. Thank you.
Okay, so any other discussion? Ms. Bonner, we're voting.
Okay, Mr. Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Franham,
No, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hassan,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
No, ma'am.
Miss McKnight,
Yes, ma'am.
Miss Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
That's yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Franham and Mr. Johnson voting no.
Thank you. Ms. Bonner, let's go to number 20.
Item number 20 is to discuss 2020 vacation pay for public safety workers that are unable to use by the extended deadline due to work demands or staff shortage.
Mr. Commissioner Frana.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I put this on there because I've had some Richmond County deputies reach out to me, and due to staff shortages as well as workload, they're not going to be able to take any vacation between now and the extended deadline that we put in place back in November, I think. And this individual is going to have close to 100 hours that they're not going to be able to use. And I think that basically I want to start the conversation today and let the administrator kind of dive into this on like what he thinks we should do. But I do think that there's should be some form of buyback. Don't know what that looks like. I'm going to lead on his expertise. But for these public safety workers that are not able to take any vacation, even with the extension, and they're going to lose money. And I think we owe it to them based on what we went through in 2020. So I'm going to leave it there and let the discussion start, but that's kind of where I want to start the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Administrator, can you pick
Yes,
up
sir.
there? You got anything to say about that?
No, I mean, I think it's a great effort to make sure we support our public safety officers and our those essential workers that really haven't been able to take full advantage of this. We've started working on it since we saw the agenda come out, and Commissioner Franson was kind enough to talk to me about it briefly. So we have researched that our ADP and One Solution technology does allow us to do certain things like create a different leave category so that they don't lose it. You could also do kind of a hybrid where maybe you pay out a portion of it and then ensure that they don't lose the rest, and they could use it as a FIFO. I'm sorry, that's an acronym. First in, first out, when they're using their leave to working on a few things. So with the time that he is granted, we should be able to bring a recommendation back to the commission.
Okay, is there any other discussion? All right, so do we want to just take it as information and personnel come back?
You had some hands up, sir.
Okay. I can't see everybody, so it's good. All right, Commissioner from the floor, go ahead.
Mr. Garrett's hands there too.
Commissioner Garrett was first. I go after him, Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Garrett.
Thank you, Commissioner Sias. I too have heard these comments from, not only the public safety folks out there, but a lot of the employees that were essential during the shutdown and, just keeping our government going. They've accrued quite a bit of vacation, and, a lot of them are approaching retirement this year or next year. A lot of them are looking at losing lots and lots of hours of accrued time that is owed to them. So Administrator Donald, as we're looking at this, I want to make sure that we're including all of those as well.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Sias.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Garrett said nearly about what I was going to say. So, but I will say this, first off, we should have a very liberal consideration for all these folks that's in this position. And as you know, Administrator, I discussed one particular individual with you, and this is one of them cases where I guess we can find a reason to support some and maybe some not. So in that case, I think we need to look at all of these folks who are in this position. So that's going to be my concern, that we treat everybody fairly in this position, not just only public safety, but there were many other essential workers and folks who've been working throughout this pandemic. So I think we need to consider everybody who's in that position. And that will be something that can get my help on that, but let's consider everybody. Thank you.
All right, any other discussion? Anybody see any hands up? All right, so we're gonna take this as information, and Administrator, you're gonna bring it back a recommendation at the next meeting, correct?
That's correct, sir.
All right, February 2nd, Ms. Bonner.
Yes, sir. So we're going to receive this as information with referring it to the administrator without objection.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All right. So where do we go next, Ms. Bonner?
We got item number 26.
All right.
Item number 26 is a presentation by Administrator Donald on the Augusta, Georgia COVID-19 Path Forward Plan. Authorize the administrator to move forward with implementing the COVID-19 plan.
All right, Administrator Donald.
Yes, sir, Mayor Pro Tem and Commission. Very quickly, this presentation is really just information provided to the commission about our activities related to COVID-19. Wanted to give you a heads up that as you know, the cases are rising pretty quickly here in Richmond County, and they have also impacted some of our staff members as well with some rising cases. Augusta has not had a formal internal way to be able to respond to COVID and ensure that not only our staff are safe, but there's no interruption in services. And I also noticed that the commission has not received a comprehensive update on the impact on the pandemic on service operations. And so we have put together an internal working group consisting of all of our various service areas, as well as prepared information so the commission can make certain decisions that are required by the Department of Public Health. Right now, they are inundated in issuing the vaccine for the category of 1A, which is mainly our public safety and health partners and staff members. And once they move to 1B, which goes beyond that, which there isn't enough vaccine for at this time, there needs to be a priority list provided by the commission, which we would relay to public health to be able to identify who's next in line, at least related to Augusta, Richmond County staff. And so the document that I provided you provides those insights and those details of the staff recommendation. It's not anything final. You don't have to approve it today. It's just something for you to look at. Secondly, while the EEO has determined that you can make it mandatory, the vaccine, we actually issue a survey to all Augusta employees, and we saw that close to 75% of those employees are willing to take it voluntarily, and the remainder of that group, for the most part, with more information, would also be willing to take it. So it is not our recommendation at this time that Augusta make it a mandatory vaccine. And I think the final piece is that one of the biggest bottlenecks that we have in delivering services across our service areas is that we don't have authorization for telework because there's not actually a policy in place. So there's a draft policy for the commission to review with the hopes that if the idea is accepted, if I understand how you do policy here, if the idea is accepted, we would then forward that draft policy to legal to bring back to the commission at a future meeting. And so that is the overall overview of that document. It is about 30 pages long. It tells you about our cases. It shows you the trend of them going up. It also shows you the administrative things that, while they don't necessarily require commission approval, I wanted to make sure that you knew all of the steps that we were taking to keep both our residents and our staff members safe.
Gotcha. Any comments? Any comments? Thank you. We just take that as information. All right, Ms. Bonner, where are we going now? 28?
28, yes, sir.
Mr.
Item
Hop-
28, discuss the current Richmond County Judicial Circuit.
All right, Mr. Hassan.
No, that's the attorney. Well,
Oh, that's the attorney?
yes, sir.
Y'all took my license?
Attorney Brown, let's go.
We ain't never had any.
They've been revoked.
No, no, ma'am. You ain't had
to do
none.
it publicly. You could have done it on the side, Bob.
Driver license don't make you an attorney.
Application.
Attorney Brown.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners. This item was the commission's request, was placed on the agenda for consideration of the resolution that you instructed me to prepare regarding the possible judicial circuit split. And that resolution was forwarded to you earlier, and it's also in your agenda book for your consideration.
Okay.
Motion
Mr.
to
Hassan,
approve
do you
the
have
resolution.
something to say?
No, I don't have anything. Motion to approve the resolution. And just motion to approve it.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Ms. Bonner, let's vote.
Okay, Mr. Sun and Mr. Johnson. Okay, Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Franum? Out, okay. Mr. Garrett? Mr. Garrett? Mr. Sun?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams?
No, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Dennis Williams voting no, Mr. Franum and Mr. Garrett out.
Is there any other business, Ms. Bonner?
No, sir, that's it.
You guys have a great day.
The man, Mayor Pro Tem.
Y'all have a great day. Be good.
Ms. Catherine got something she want to say to you. Commissioner.
I just wanted to ask y'all something real quick now that we've, and y'all might can answer this for me. I was informed that basically we already got 5
Can we help?
judges.
Hey, help for a second. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, sir.
We might be in a bad position to have this discussion.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
That's fine.
All right, so y'all call each other.
We're good.
Good
We're
night.
good. We're good.
Boy, give somebody what do you call it? A mallet or a hammer or what do you call